Between 1887 and 1889, it was a fearful time in London as death stalked the dark and dank side streets of the city. Jack the Ripper stalked the back alleyways at night, preying on innocent victims. But other events unfolded during this time, just as cold-hearted as the eponymous Jack, which were equally or more horrific. They became known collectively as the Thames torso murders, a series of slayings of gruesome proportions. Speculation has linked the Thames events to that of the contemporary Whitechapel murders. The way the bodies were desecrated by the perpetrator differs in a number of ways from that of the victims of the Ripper, who inflicted progressive abdominal mutilation, whereas the Thames murderer dismembered the bodies of his victims. Only one of the four was ever identified. These events were overshadowed by the hysteria surrounding the activities that happened in Whitechapel, and covered a longer time period and were far more brutal in nature. Evidence that a killer was at large first appeared in May 1887, when some workers encountered a wrapped bundle containing the torso of a female in the River Thames near Rainham. Over the next few weeks, various body parts were found in various parts of London, thought to belong to the same woman, also in the river. Only the head and upper chest were never recovered. The investigation concluded that the body had not been dissected for medical purposes, but that a degree of medical knowledge had been necessary to perform the dissection, which was precisely done. Because the doctors, including police surgeon Dr. Thomas Bond, could not state categorically as to the cause of death, the coroner's jury had no alternative but to return a verdict of found dead. The government offered a reward of £200 and a free pardon for any accomplice who could lead them to the actual murderer. The case remained open and was never solved, nor the victim's identity being discovered. What became known as the Whitehall Mystery is another unsolved murder that took place in London in 1888. The dismembered remains of a woman were discovered at 3 sites around the centre of the city between the 11th of September and the 17th of October. A right arm and shoulder were discovered on the muddy shore of the River Thames in Pimlico. The Times newspaper had initially suspected that the arm was placed in the water as a medical student's prank. A left arm turned up in Lambeth. A week or so later, during construction of the Metropolitan Police's new headquarters, to be known as New Scotland Yard, on the Victoria Embankment near Whitehall in Westminster, a worker found a package containing human remains. It turned out to be a female torso and was discovered in a recently built vault that made up part of the cellar of the new building. It was placed there at some point before the 29th of September, when Richard Lawrence, a workman, had last been inside the unlocked area. The body had been wrapped in cloth, possibly a black petticoat, and tied with string. The torso was matched by the police surgeon Dr. Bond to the previously found arm and shoulder. On the 17th of October, reporter Jasper Waring used a sniffer dog, with the permission of the police and the help of a labourer, discovered a left leg cut above the knee that was buried on the construction site. The head and remaining limbs were never found, and the identity of the victim was never established. Newspapers suggested a connection between this murder and the Jack the Ripper atrocities in and around the Whitechapel area that were occurring simultaneously. but the police ruled out any connection between the cases. An inquest was opened by Westminster's coroner, John Troutbeck, on the 8th of October. It determined that the woman had been of large stature and well nourished, suggesting she had been approximately 24 years old and 5 feet 8 inches in height. The uterus had been removed from the body. The right arm had been severed by someone with some knowledge of human anatomy and had been tourniqueted to stem blood flow, and due to the lack of muscle contraction, was removed post-mortem. It was also revealed that the victim had been wearing a satin dress at the time of death, which had been manufactured in Bradford from a pattern estimated to be 3 years old. Pieces of newspaper found with the remains were from the Echo of the 24th of August and an issue of the Chronicle of unknown date. Although the cause of death was unknown, the victim had not suffocated or drowned. Besides the uterus being absent, it was noted that the left lung had severe pleurisy. Nothing was found to indicate that the victim had borne children. The heart was healthy, and the right lung, liver, stomach, kidneys and spleen were normal. She had been dead for around 6 weeks to 2 months, and had fair skin and dark hair. Furthermore, the condition of the hand recovered suggested the decedent was not an individual who was accustomed to manual labour. It is rather ironic that New Scotland Yard, arguably the world's best-known police building, was originally built on a crime scene related to an unsolved murder. They had a case to solve even before their new building had been completed. On the 4th of June 1889, a female torso was discovered in the Thames, and more body parts were soon found in the river the following week. The Times reported on the 11th that the remains found so far were as follows. Tuesday, left leg and thigh of Battersea, lower part of the abdomen at Horsley Down. Thursday, the liver near Nine Elms, upper part of the body in Battersea Park, neck and shoulders off Battersea. Friday, right foot and part of leg at Wandsworth, left leg and foot at Limehouse. Saturday, left arm and hand at Bankside, buttocks and pelvis off Battersea, right thigh at Chelsea Embankment. Yesterday, right arm and hand at Bankside. Again, the investigation concluded that medical knowledge had been necessary to perform the dismemberment. At the inquest held by Mr. Hicks on the 17th of June, it was said that the division of the parts showed skill and design, not, however, the anatomical skill of a surgeon, but the practical knowledge of a butcher. There was a great similarity between the condition, as regards cutting up, of the remains and that of those found at Rainham, and at the new police building on the Thames Embankment. The Times of the 5th of June reported that, in the opinion of the doctors, the woman had been dead only 48 hours, and the body had been dissected somewhat roughly by a person who must have had some knowledge of the joints of the human body. She was also about 8 months pregnant. The doctors were also this time unable to establish a cause of death. The coroner's jury reached the decision of wilful murder by some person or persons unknown. Though the head was never found, the victim later was identified as Elizabeth Jackson, a homeless prostitute from Chelsea. The case again was never solved. It's an interesting fact that one of the body parts was thrown over the railings of the Shelley estate, where previously Mary Shelley had written the novel entitled Frankenstein, about a monster pieced together with various body parts. 1888 has been considered to be the year of the Ripper in the history of London. During his 10-week deadly maraudings, he had managed to shake Victorian society to the core. By the end of the year, interest had died down, and that the streets of London were safe from him for good. The same could not be said for the Thames murders, which were about to start again. On the 10th of September 1889, at 5:15 a.m., Police Constable William Pennett found the headless and legless torso of an unidentified woman under a railway arch at Pinchin Street in Whitechapel. It seems probable that the murder was committed elsewhere, and that the parts of the dismembered body were dispersed for disposal. There was extensive bruising on the victim's back, hip, and arm, which indicated that she had been severely beaten shortly before her death, which had occurred approximately 1 day prior to the discovery of her remains. The victim's abdomen was also extensively mutilated, in a manner reminiscent of the Ripper, although there were differences. The dismembered sections were believed to have been transported in some way to the railway arch and hidden under an old blanket. The age of the victim was estimated at between 30 and 40 years old. Despite a search of the area, no other sections of her body were ever found, and neither the victim or the perpetrator were ever identified. The pathologist concluded that the general bloodlessness of the body tissues and veins indicated that hemorrhage was the cause of death. Newspapers speculated that the cadaver belonged to Lydia Hart, who had disappeared, but was refuted after she was found recovering in hospital after a bit of a spree. Another claimed that the victim was a missing girl called Emily Barker was also ruled out, as the torso was from an older and taller woman. The police again did not consider this to be a Ripper case, and instead suggested a link to the murders in Rainham and Chelsea, as well as the Whitehall Mystery. These 3 murders and the Pinchin Street case were suggested to be the work of a serial killer, who could either be the same person as Jack the Ripper, or a separate person of uncertain connection. Links between these and 3 further murders have also been put forward. Perhaps inevitably, other cases were associated with the Thames murders. For instance, in Battersea there were 2 unsolved crimes. On the 5th of September 1873, the left quarter of a woman's body was discovered by a Thames police patrol near Battersea. Subsequently, a right breast was found at Nine Elms, a head at Limehouse, a left forearm at Battersea, a pelvis at Woolwich, until an almost complete body of a dismembered woman had been found. The nose and chin had been cut from the face, and the head had been scalped. As in the Rainham case of 1887, there were daily reports in the press about the progress of the case during the month, especially when body parts had been found. Under the leadership of the Metropolitan Police Surgeon, Dr. Bond, the corpse was reconstructed by sewing together the individual body parts. The face was more of a challenge, as the nose and chin were missing, and the head had been scalped. The remaining skin on the face was fitted as naturally as was possible. Even though this early attempt at forensic reconstruction was carried out with ingenuity and skill, the result would only be recognizable by people who knew the victim well. Attempts to identify the remains were disturbed by the curiosity of the public, and the police first showed a photograph to any potential witness. They had to turn away many people who had a morbid curiosity to view the body. This included so-called dealers in horror, who were trying to obtain a drawing of the remains. The Lancet reported, contrary to the popular opinion, the body had not been hacked, but dexterously cut up. The joints had been opened, and the bones neatly disarticulated, even the complicated joints at the ankle and the elbow, and it is only at the articulations of the hip joint and shoulder that the bones have been sawn through. The jury passed a verdict of wilful murder by some person or persons unknown. The case remained unsolved, in spite of a reward being offered for information. The following year in June, the dismembered body of a female was discovered in the River Thames at Putney. The corpse lacked a head, both arms, one leg, and had been treated with lime, so it was quite decomposed before being thrown in the river. The jury returned an open verdict. This case, again, remains unsolved. It was reported by the Times on the 24th of October 1884 that related to the discovery of parts of a woman's body. A skull, still with flesh attached to it, and a chunk of flesh from a thigh bone were found near Tottenham Court Road, and in Bedford Square a woman's arm was found in a brown paper parcel. This arm had been tattooed, indicating that it might have belonged to a prostitute. A human torso was found wrapped in a large parcel by a police constable as he passed 33 Fitzroy Square 5 days later. Having a closer look, he discovered part of a human body. The area was frequently patrolled by the police, and the murderer, according to the Pall Mall Gazette, was exceedingly lucky when leaving the remains on the pavement, which would have happened between 10 o'clock and 10:15 in the morning. The building was also a military drill hall and armoury. Evidence was presented in an inquest on the 11th of November, which was held at St Giles Coroner's Court. It concluded that the body parts came from a woman, and that they might have been divided by someone who was skilled, but not for the purpose of anatomy. The inquest was delayed in the hope that new information would be found, and it resumed on the 9th of December, where more evidence was presented and showed how the body was skillfully dissected and came from a female, as stated by Dr. Jenkins. The evidence was the right arm, both feet and the right forearm of a single individual. All of these mysteries still remain unsolved to this day. Over the years, speculation has linked the Thames torso murders to those of the contemporary Whitechapel murders and Jack the Ripper. But both sets of crimes differed, as the Ripper mutilated the abdomens of his victims, whilst the Thames murderer dismembered the bodies. The police at the time discounted any connection between the two. The River Thames has long been the end of the road for those choosing suicide, victims of crime, and unfortunate accidents. Parliamentary records for 1882 show that 544 corpses were found in the Thames, of which 277 cases resulted in open verdicts.